Hey guys, Luke here. So in this video we're going to talk about how you can underloop. So firstly, what is an underloop? An underloop is basically a way of flying the kite where you change directions that isn't above your head. So essentially what we do is we bring the kite underneath through the power zone as we're changing direction. And so you might use an underloop when you're jibing. You can also use it on a twin tip when you're tacking, but you're essentially bringing the kite down through the power zone as you complete your jibe on either a surfboard or a twin tip or when you're foiling, and it keeps the kite in the wind as you go around. Really smooth power delivery, and it's a nice skill to learn. It's something, probably one of the first new kite skills, if you will, that people will learn after they've been progressing for a while. You start to think, okay, well, if I don't bring my kite over my head to change direction and I bring it around the other way, you know, that's something new and exciting to learn. So in this video we're going to talk about how you can do it, what you need to do as you're flying the kite, what you do with your bar, and I'll give you some general tips so you can start underlooping. So firstly, let's talk about when you might underloop. So you might use an underloop when it's important that you want to keep the kite into the wind. So for instance, while you're foiling, if you bring an underloop down and through the wind, then the kite holds more power and it's less likely to fall out of the sky or to bring you off foil as you fall, because there's such a different power gradient as you bring it back over your head typically. So bringing it down through an underloop keeps that power zone, the kite flies through the sky, and that's a really good way to actually keep momentum in light wind when you're foiling. You might also do it just when you're typically riding a surfboard to reposition your kite. I do that sometimes when I'm on a wave. Instead of bringing the kite back and over, you actually bring it under and through the power zone as well. And a funny story actually from one of the guys at Ocean Rodeo, he said that he's riding along and he was chatting with another guy about it, and he's saying you're riding along and someone's tailgating you. So you want to turn around but you can't. You're riding this way and you can see someone right there, but you can't bring your kite past 12 because their kite's sort of in your way. So you bring the underloop around, you go ripping around, and then you flick them a dirty look on the way past because they're right tailgating you. So I thought that was pretty funny. But you know, the joke aside, that is actually probably one of the main times that I do use it, is when someone's right there on me. I'm trying to ride along, I can't turn around, might be busy, you know, it's not their fault, I don't give them a dirty look, but you know, they're right behind me. And then so basically, instead of bringing the kite over through the sky and then down the other way, you start to initiate your jibe and then bring the kite down and forward, and that sort of brings you around and gets your kite out of their way, and you go around and then you can change direction. So let's talk about how you can do it. So the main difference with the underloop is that if you're typically changing direction, so I've got the wind at my back right now, I'm heading across this way, normally you'd start to steer with your backhand and let the kite come over your head and then change direction and go this way. With the underloop, you've got your kite at 45 degrees, you're going in forward motion, and instead of coming on your backhand and bringing the kite over the top of your head, you actually pull on the bottom hand or the front hand, and the kite will move down underneath as you complete your turn. Okay, so it takes a little bit of getting used to. You got to think about it a little bit if you trained yourself to sort of go over your head every time. So again, what we're going to be doing is heading in either direction, of course, going along, kite at 45 degrees, nice and stable, and then with the kite, what we're going to do is, instead of steering it back, we're going to steer it under and let the kite go tuck under and then race back through. Now at the same time, what we're looking to do is actually start to move downwind with it, similar to how you'd normally jibe. I would say that if you've never done a jibe, go and do a jibe normally, learn that, bring your kite over your head first. But then once you've got that, I'd say probably one of the biggest differences with your underloop is it does generate some more power through the power zone. So you sort of have to give it a little more space as you go downwind. So head downwind a little bit more, and you need to keep tension on the lines. So depending on the wind speed will depend on how much you'll give it. And also I've noticed that it also depends on how early you start turning in comparison to when you start underlooping the kite. So let me give you an example. If it's really light, then I will start underlooping the kite at exactly the same time as I start doing my jibe. And that will keep the tension on the lines. So you're going along, you got kite at 45, start to underloop it, then initiate your jibe at the same time, and then as it comes through, then the kite will move through the power zone there and then edge against it. So you can see I'm sort of doing my jibe, but that's typically the main way that I do it. And so now I'm edging against it to keep that tension on the lines. If the wind's really strong, I find that if I do that at the same time, I get sort of yarded. So what I do in that circumstance is I actually initiate the jibe and then start the underloop. So the kite's sort of at 45 degrees, and as I start to initiate the jibe, that will take some of that tension off the lines, so it won't be such a big yank when I start to underloop it. And so you start with a little bit of that and then bring the kite under, and that will keep it smooth. So again, really dependent on wind strength. You want to, if it's light wind, then yes, you'll probably do them exactly the same time. If it's stronger wind, sort of just initiate that jibe to take some of that line tension off before you do the loop, and then you'll let it then it'll let the kite come through without really pulling you. Again, very similar to the jibe, you're going to be completing them sort of together, so that as you come out of your jibe, the kite should be coming through the wind, and then you edge against it, and then you should be able to tack off in the other direction. Okay, so now let's go through a little more in detail what we do with the bar. So with the bar, as we start to initiate that underloop, you actually sort of sheet in a little bit, because what you need to do is turn the kite at quite a tight radius. You can't have the kite do a big sweeping loop because it will smash into the water. Also, you need to commit to it, because sometimes on the very first attempt, you might start and think, oh, it's not working, and bang, the kite tomahawks straight down into the water. So you need to sheet in a bit so the kite will do a tighter radius loop, and then turn it, and then as the kite comes around and you're doing your jibe and you start to see, okay, now it's pointing in the direction that I want to go, it's like, you know, it's not going to hit the water anymore, then what I like to do is sheet out a little bit at that point. That will let the kite sort of move forward and sort of race into the window a little bit, and it won't stall, because what tends to happen is as you sort of sheet in a little bit and bring it around in that tight radius, it moves directly downwind of you. And so then as you've sort of completed that, sheet out a little bit, let the kite race forward, and then you should be riding just how you normally would. The same is works exactly the same on the other way. So I'm a regular stance, so typically I'm riding my toe side this way, and then what I'll do is reach forward, initiate my jibe, reach forward, pull in a little bit, tuck it around, let the underloop go around, and then as I start to come out the other side, sheet out a little bit, and then ride off on my heels. Okay, so a couple of tips to get you started for the first time. First thing, wind strength. You might want to try this for the first time on your 10 meter or your 12 meter, so you don't sort of get thrown over the front. Not too strong wind. You don't want it to be so light that you're having trouble riding. So just a comfortable riding sort of strength on your 10 or your 12 meter will help for your very first time. Also, I like to start on my toes. I think if you're going to try it for the very first time, I actually like to start on my toe side first, and then try the underloop, and then so you come around onto your heels. So if you're not already on your toes, switch your feet or sort of pop and change position, so now you're on your toes, and then underloop it around as you do your jibe. I think that that's a little bit easier for the first time, because you're coming out of the underloop in your comfortable riding stance on your heels. Whereas if you start the other way and you start it from your comfortable riding stance on your heels and go to your toe side, and something goes wrong, has too much power, you sort of get pulled over backwards. So I think for the first time, actually initiate from toe side, start like this, underloop it, jibe around onto your heels, and that should work pretty nicely, particularly if you're in that moderate wind that's not too extreme for the first attempts. Anyway, there's some tips for starting to do your first underloop. Get out there, give it a practice, let us know in the comments how it's working for you. If you have any questions, we'll be stoked to answer them. That's it for this video. Luke here, and we'll see you in the next one.